We all fire over here.
So you're free, officer?
Yes, I think I'm free.
Come on, officer. Gotcha.
So we always said the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you remember I said, with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pig. The people are going to have to stand up against the pig. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
We have brought to trial here Brett Hampton. You are here to judge between two conflicting testimonies. Somebody is lying. Now, reason stands. Reason is very clear here. That Private Jones, who had come from Sanford, North Carolina, would have no great desire to see Brett Hampton.
But she's fighting to not
But
dealing with
Brett Hampton, a key figure in this community, has great reason for not wanting to
Tracy
be
and
put
Ronnie.
in jail.
But the state's attorney
The
and the state's attorney's office
she's
has reason
amazing.
to see Fred Hampton in jail. We've got a new state's attorney. And he said already what he thought about people that had different political beliefs than he had. His speeches sound somewhat like those of Hitler. And we know why he wants to see Fred Hampton put in jail. Why do I have a lot of arrests? Because of harassment. Why is there harassment? Because the people that harass me have set up a problem that made me disagree with them violently. And they set up this problem in order to exploit me and other people like me. And why they want to get rid of me? Because I'm saying something that might wake up some other exploited people and some other oppressed people. And if all these people ever get together, then these pigs that are exploiting us, we'll be able to run them into the lake. That's why they want to get rid of us. And it's just, it's sort of like a primary thing with me. I'm the first move that they'll make. I'm a part of the organization who will be the first organization they'll move on because I happen to be a part of the organization, the Black Panther Party. That is the only organization, in fact, that has came out and stood up loud and clear saying that we don't care what anybody says, whether they have guns or not and badges or 18 uniforms. If whenever they step outside the bounds of legality into the bounds of illegality, then we'll blow their brains out if they're bothering people. Look at Will. And what makes them mad about that? They're constantly bothering
Joe.
people. Anybody that's out there for the protection of the people happens to be in direct conflict with them. What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they have black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They had them caught up in their movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think to fight fire with fire fists. We think to fight fire with water fists. We're going to fight racism, not racism, but we're going to fight the solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions with all of us people to get together and have an international post-hand revolution. Right on. Let's make it on. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here. You got pigs of all colors.
That was at the Hampton House last
You
year.
got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black, you even got pigs that are black and white. Propagating the same type of madness that this buffoon Hanrahan would be propagating if he would hear himself. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy, and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would disregard him and overlook him just for a minute and throw away that question of racism and start into dealing with a little logic, then there would be no one else you could attack other than Hanrahan, other than Davy, and other than tricky-dicky mixing. If you make the right decision, then the oppressed people of the world get complete satisfaction. I know you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
My name is Joe Amrine. 67 years old. I stay here in Kansas City, Missouri. I spent 27 years in Missouri State Prison. I spent 17 years on Missouri's death row. I was exonerated in 2003, so I've been out 20 years. Next month will be 20 years, my anniversary. I had a struggle trying to get my freedom, even though I was actually innocent. I was convicted of committing a murder in prison at Missouri State Penitentiary of another inmate. There was no evidence against me, but they had inmates who testified against me for the state, which is one of the issues which we hear today about. Inmates being allowed to testify against other inmates without having no physical evidence to corroborate their testimonies.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank you all for being here. Real quick before I even start what I'm saying about me, I wanted to just recognize the person that spoke last. Mr. Joe Amrine was one of the 4 people exonerated from Missouri's death row. Joe has been home for over 20 years now. He still resides in Kansas City, Missouri. He is literally a treasure. He's such a sweet person, and he survived something that most of us could not. So I'm always thankful when I see his face. When I speak to him, he really reminds me of why I do this work. So I just wanted to recognize Joe Amrine and invite you all to learn more about him and his case. It set a lot of precedents in our state. But I'll go ahead and move on. Again, thank you all for coming. So this session is called The Most Northern State of the South, Building a Prison Advocacy Movement in Missouri. And I created the name specifically because we are considered the Midwest, right? I know everybody says that the Midwest or flyover country. And I have for the last couple of years been trying to push around the country that Missouri is the South. Right, Missouri was the last slaveholding state. There are so many dynamics, regardless of geography, that situates Missouri as a southern state. So that's something that has been my passion to really talk about when people say, oh, Midwest, Kansas, and Illinois. I'm like, we're not Kansas nor Illinois. This is misery, right? So that's why I named it that. So in national narratives, Missouri is often mistaken to be a slow-paced Midwest state with characteristics similar to those of Illinois, Kansas, and Nebraska. On the contrary, Missouri may be geographically situated in the middle of the country. However, it is in fact the most northern southern state. Historically, and still today, of course, dotted with sundown towns patrolled by good old boys and counties that rank among some of the poorest in the nation, as well as the whitest. For our purposes here today, Missouri being the last slaveholding state directly correlates to how the present day criminal punishment and prison systems mimic the characteristics of other southern formerly slaveholding states. The violence, the deaths, the exploitative labor, and criminal statutes found in Missouri are more akin to states like Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi, as opposed to other geographically Midwest states. As prison, organizing, advocacy, and abolitionist struggles in Missouri are 2 to 3 decades behind many other states, we today will discuss efforts to create and build a statewide prison advocacy movement, the difficulties, the strategies, and the call for solidarity and support. I am M.L. Smith. I founded MoJustice in 2022. I founded this organization because there was a gap, there was a big hole when I looked around at our prison system and what advocacy and organizing and support looked like. There definitely are places where, in little pockets, people are doing things, and I take nothing away from those people, either it be families or organizations working on certain issues, but overall, we did not have a space where we can be in coalition, unify, and push our state government, for the most part, to reform our prison system. And so that was my main goal in founding the organization. And I have, over these last 3 years now, been working to build it, grow it, and form partnerships and coalitions, including the people we see here today. 3 of my, I call them my comrades, my friends, my brothers and sisters who are in this work with me and dedicated to it. Once they start speaking, they'll introduce themselves a little bit more, but I wanted to really quickly introduce Sheena Rogers. Sheena spent 25 years in Missouri prison, went in as a juvenile. Sheena has been home for several years now and also dedicated, her work to advocacy around our prison system. Sheena has been dynamic in issues like child marriage and getting that banned in Missouri. And we definitely appreciate you being here today, sis. Mataka Askari is also a formerly incarcerated organizer and advocate. Mataka, you did, I believe, 23 years. 23 years in a Missouri a prison. Mataka is also a faith leader when he was incarcerated and has dedicated himself as well to community organizing and advocacy. And Clifton Davis. Clifton also went to prison as a juvenile and did 26 years. Clifton has been home, actually the least of all of us, like 2 or 3 years now, I believe, 3 years. And from the time he came home, he jumped right in. I connected with him, and he has been doing some great work in Columbia as well as the rest of the state with us as well. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate you so much. So we're going to go ahead and go through a few slides, not many. We have a few slides we want to talk about, talk more about why this work is necessary, why we need support. And then at the end, I definitely want to get any questions from the audience, if there are any. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. Opening slide, and we're going to go to the first slide. So this is about rates of incarceration in southern states, and I'm going to kick it to Mataka to talk a little bit more about that. I think it's on.
Okay. So when we look at the incarceration rates and when we look at ML's very persuasive ideology and understanding that Missouri fits within the scope of the slave states when it comes to the incarceration rates. If we understand that the modern prison system was modeled after the plantation system, then we can understand that these ideologies were driven by racism. So when we look at some of these states, which are states that are known for their slavery, we can see that the racist ideologies continued even into the criminalization of people of color. And so when we look at Missouri's population, this is per 100,000 citizens. Missouri is top 10. It's in the top 10. It's number 10. And so what this indicates to us is if we look at the other states and we understand the history and how the modern prison system was an extension of the plantation system, we can see that the ideology also exists in Missouri. And so Missouri is in the top 10. So when we make the argument that it is the northern, the most northern southern state, right? When we make that argument, the evidence is clearly indicative of that.
Taka, I just came back yesterday from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was at another conference and we were talking about these things. And they mentioned that there are still 3 plantation prisons. So at one point, these places were plantations. Today, they are actually prisons. One is in Louisiana, of course, Angola. One is in Mississippi, it's Parchman. And the other is in Texas. And I think it's called Jackson Prison, if I'm not mistaken. But still today, the remnants of, like you say, enslavement, you can see it because literally they have turned a plantation into a prison. And they work chain gangs. And I mean, basically, when you look at it, it's definitely slavery. So that is something that just brought that to my mind.
A lot of the when you particularly when you mention Parchman, right? It's known, notoriously known for its convict leasing, right? And convict leasing is a form of criminalizing black people after slavery for the purpose of filling up these prisons and getting free labor. So again, it's consistent and it supports that ideology that Missouri is the most northern of the southern states.
Yeah. And that recognition I don't just talk about Missouri as being the most northern southern state just to be doing something right. What I'm really trying to do is get not only the information out, so educate people, but also get the support and resources, because we're considered flyover country. It's like not a lot of attention is paid to these issues. I often have gotten on like Zoom calls and meetings and like went back and forth with people like in Texas and Florida about whose governor is the worst, right? Like we talk, this is something that we do, and not this current governor. I don't, he hasn't been in long enough to be as horrible as a person, but our previous governor did a whole lot of, horrible stuff. And he modeled himself after Abbott in Texas and after DeSantis in Florida. These were his basic role models, right? So, that's something that we always kind of, laughingly did, but it was very serious, how Missouri followed so many other southern states in their horrors. And we're going to talk about a few more of those a little bit later, but thank you so much, yes, Mataka. So we started with incarceration rates, right? So Missouri is number 10 per capita in incarceration. The next slide is going to be about specifically the incarceration of Black people. Okay, there it goes. And we're going to turn it over to Clifton to talk a little bit more about this Southern justice.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I want to, for lack of a better term, also piggyback on what Mataka said about the top 10 and some of the facts. I'm pretty sure this audience is familiar with Michelle Alexander and her book, The New Jim Crow, that was highly acclamated by President Barack Obama. If you look at some of the things, the system, the mindset, the thing with the term that we use, institutionalized racism. And institutionalized racism, we know it, just in a nutshell, is that someone takes their belief system and they codify it in statutes and laws and legislation so that this belief system can outlive them and continue on into the future when they long dead and gone. And even though you may not be a bigot, even though you may not be president, even though you may not be racist, but you have to, or you're forced to participate in a system that the designers of this system were all that you may not claim or ascribe to. And so we're not here to say that the system is broken. We're saying that the system is working exactly as it was designed to do. We're not dealing with a broken system. We're dealing with a system that needs to be completely torn down and built from scratch. When we look at some of the numbers here in the state of Missouri, is that currently the Black population is around 12%. Yet Black people make up over 34% of the prison population in the state of Missouri, as well as Black men are incarcerated at a rate of 4-to-1 to white men in the state of Missouri. Recently, the FBI every year gives out these statistics about who the highway patrol pulls over and who they search and the contraband that they find. It's found that even though whites that are pulled over are found to have contraband or possess contraband more than anyone else that is pulled over, and Blacks have less, Blacks still continue to be pulled over at a disproportionate rate than anyone else in the state of Missouri. Recently, I experienced where a lady from Pakistan was pulled over in Columbia, Missouri, and she received a ticket. And when she got home, and this was right after these statistics just came out this year, she called and she had a friend of hers tell me that they put down her race as white to screw the numbers because these profiling is being documented. And so she took a copy of the ticket and she wanted to contest. She said, "I'm not white. Why you put on this ticket that I'm white?" And this is just the mentality of Missouri. Something that Mataka talked about, and it's still going on today, is that in the 13th Amendment, you have the exception clause. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in these United States except for one who's been duly convicted of a crime. So slavery didn't end, it just changed forms. And that's something that we have to be aware of, is that slavery did not end. It changed form from individual slave ownership to government slave ownership. And then that mindset and that idea was codified in laws, and they passed laws to re-enslave Black men for petty crimes, for not being able to show proof of employment, for being out after dark without a pass. And still to this day, that mindset still exists in in the state of Missouri. If you go back to 9/11, in 2001, the president at that time, George Bush, all the money that what we call the so-called first black president, Bill Clinton, gave to states to pass mandatory minimums and build prisons, Bush took that money back for the Patriot Act and to fight so-called terrorism. And so the state of Missouri was faced with a dilemma. And there's also an article that was in the St. Louis, what's the major paper here?
American.
The Post-Dispatch, yes. There was an article you can Google, and where the state of Missouri had already voted and allocated money to build Bonterra, Charleston, and Licking, these 3 prisons. These prisons at that time in 2001, before 9/11, were going to be designated as medium security prisons. But when the federal government said, we're not giving you no more money for prison, and I think, in fact, Bush was quoted saying, just put a fence around the whole damn prison. The state, yeah. Thank you. And so what Missouri did is that they used a loophole is that if you make it a maximum security prison, you can get federal funding. So Missouri, what they did, they made these prisons that were going to be medium security prisons, maximum security prisons, so they can receive federal funding. And then they didn't just make them maximum security prison, they didn't have enough maximum security prisoners to fill up the prisons. So they reclassified individuals with minor offenses to fill up these prisons so that they can continue to receive federal funding. So it goes to show that even though the individuals that run government in the state of Missouri today wasn't born in 1833 when slaves built the Missouri State Prison in 1833 MSP, that mindset still exists today. It's still been handed down to where incarceration and punishment, not only with incarceration, but after incarceration, it still continues on today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Clifton. And all of that is so real. I wanted to look at the graphic real quickly. The last one we had showed that Missouri was number 10 in just incarceration overall. And this one says that we moved up a little bit. So now we're number 8 in our incarceration of black populations versus the actual general population. And of course, places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, they're all represented because these, of course, the places where enslavement just regurgitated, right, to incarcerating people. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, and Sheena and I are going to kind of piggyback and talk about these 2 particular things. I will say that a lot of the work that I am doing, and maybe you all saw yesterday, my comrades were tabling and had this sign about the triple-digit deaths. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So in 2023, December 8th of 23, a man named Othel Moore Jr. was murdered at Jefferson City Correctional Center. Othel is a child of Ferguson, Missouri, right? And of course, today we're honoring another child of Ferguson, Missouri. And Othel was tortured. He was literally tortured by 5 guards in prison. They restrained him in this chair contraption. And real quick, the reason why is because he had a broken shoulder from a previous incident, and he could not turn around and have them put handcuffs on him because he was already incapacitated, and they didn't like that. So they put him in this restraint chair. They maced him with at least a can of mace, and they put a spit hood over his head. He suffocated to death. And it was just the people around him, the other men in the cells adjacent, told us about how he was screaming and asking for help and saying, I can't breathe, because he couldn't. And they killed Othel. And so when I heard about this situation and connected with his loved ones, I had to figure out what can I, as an organizer, as an advocate, as someone who is trying to hold these systems accountable, what can I do? And so I looked at not only his horrific murder, but all the deaths within our prison system. And I created this campaign. I called it Triple-Digit Deaths, because 7 of the last 8 years, more than 100 people have died in the custody of the Missouri Department of Corrections, and literally nothing has been done about it. There is no accountability. There's no oversight. They basically are blaming family members for bringing in drugs, even though that is not something that's happening. But the violence, the overdoses, and all of these things are happening every single year in our state. Again, our elected officials are kind of like, oh, we know nothing about it. So this is the main reason why I created this campaign, to really amplify these issues. The 2024 number is 139, but I have gotten 2025 numbers as of July 31st. 75 people have died in Missouri prisons, so we are losing more than 10 people per month still today. And the work continues to amplify this issue, to try to hold our elected officials accountable, because they're the ones that's supposed to hold DOC accountable. So that is a lot of work that's going into this triple-digit deaths campaign. And the picture that's under there is an event we held January the 3rd of 2024, last year, which was the first day of our legislative session, right? And so I talked to several people's family members who had, their loved one had died in prison, and some of them didn't have funerals. They're poor. They didn't get to really mourn their loved one. They're trying to deal with the prison system about why their loved one died, because they don't really know. And so I decided to hold a mass memorial service. I wanted to first honor and memorialize these people and let their families know that they didn't matter, right? And also bring it to the Capitol, because this is the place where you all are supposed to be holding this system accountable for what it's doing. So on January 3rd of last year, we had a memorial service in the Capitol. The slideshow earlier showed one of the pastors praying over this bowl. I had written all of the names of people who had died on these wooden hearts, and a pastor prayed over them. And we held this service in the Capitol, and several family members of people who had died came, and one mother said this was the only time that her son had been recognized. So that was a very powerful day. But this particular picture, I took these black cardboard cutout things, and I kind of cut them into looking like mock headstones, and we put them around the governor's mansion, because we feel like this is the burial ground. This is where the buck should stop. This is where, if no other office, the governor should be able to deal with his Department of Corrections. And so that is where we had all of the signs around the governor's mansion, and of course they were watching us, and we didn't do anything but they threw them away later, of course, but it was a symbolic gesture. So that is the triple digit deaths campaign that I created to amplify these issues, and really again pressure and urge our elected officials to do something. I will say the last couple of years, more elected officials are going into our prisons to look for themselves, which is great. More of them are asking questions of the director of DOC, which is now a new director of DOC. So some things are moving along, but we definitely are going to keep pressing, keep urging, keep amplifying, and keep making sure that not only our elected officials know, but people across this state know that people are going in our prisons and dying, and most of them did not have a death sentence or are supposed to be dying within the prison system, but they are. So that is the triple digit deaths campaign. And I'm going to turn it to Sheena. I wanted to talk a little bit about the death penalty. And of course, you were very involved last year in Khalifa's campaign. So just talk a little bit about, what the death penalty in Missouri.
Well, in Missouri, they like to kill innocent people. Honestly, it doesn't matter if there's no DNA. It doesn't matter if there's evidence that shows that these are not the individuals. And the state of Missouri did not care. It was basically, as everybody knows, with Marcellus Williams, also known as Khalifa. I know ML's organization fought tirelessly. We all joined the coalition. And in Missouri, it's just like, they don't care about killing innocent people. They don't care about locking up innocent people. We've had people exonerated lately. Sandra Hemme, one of them, after 42 years, but our Attorney General is still trying to keep her incarcerated. Even though they've been proven innocent, it just shows you that the Attorney General and prosecutors are still trying to keep these people incarcerated even after they've been exonerated. Matter of fact, they've been trying to put her back in prison since she's been exonerated. Missouri, let's keep the prison full. Let's do as much as we can. And even as the death records, if Missouri Justice Coalition and other organizations didn't do a sunshine request, we wouldn't even know the names of the individuals. A lot of the times, they don't even call the families. It's other people, residents inside the prison that calls a mother and says, your son was taken to the hospital and passed away, or your son OD'd today. That's how families find out. Department of Corrections don't even care enough to call the families to let them know what's going on a lot of times.
Very true. In Othel Moore Jr.'s case, other people in a prison called his family and told them what happened to him. And then when his sister called the prison to inquire, right, about her brother, she got a very nasty reception. Like, you know, we can't talk to you, get off our phone for the most part is what they told her. And so there was no compassion, no empathy even for a family member who's grieving. So that's very, very true. And real quick, Sandra Hemming, other people, there's a man named Christopher Dunn that was exonerated this past year. The AG is trying to put him back in prison. Our friend Lamar was exonerated a couple of years ago. Thankfully, they're not bothering him. But the system does not, of course, like, you know, when a person is found to be innocent and they actually have to acknowledge that they failed, right, that they did something wrong. I want to turn real quickly.
Can I just mention real quick that you forgot about Mr. Moore is they did charge the officers with murder.
Yes.
But they all got bond.
Yes,
But
yes, you're right.
I don't know how many of you got bond when I was charged. I did not get bond. Matter of fact, I was denied bond. And so in the state of Missouri, you know, if you're one of them, then oftentimes you'll get bond even though you're charged with murder.
This is true. The officers were charged in Mr. Moore's case with second-degree murder. They all were bonded out. And actually, a couple of the cases have been dropped right now. I don't know exactly which ones, but it is very much a contentious thing to actually hold these people accountable. But I wanted to talk real quick, and I know we're coming up on time. We want to leave some time for questions, but we did talk about Black people and Black men in particular, but I don't want to leave out those who are further marginalized in prison. Women, elderly people, disabled people, also LGBTQ community as well. 3 years ago, Missouri executed the first trans woman. Her name was Amber McLaughlin. Missouri has executed intellectually disabled people. In 2021, Ernest Johnson was executed, had a severe mental illness. And so just these people who are either further marginalized in incarceration, you know, have it even worse. And full transparency, I didn't talk about this at the beginning. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I did not do as much time as my comrades. I did about 4 years, but I am also formerly incarcerated.
One day's too long.
Yeah, thank you, very much so, yeah, very, very much so. But I want to talk to Sheena about being in a women's prison for 25 years, right? And how, because I saw even in my time of being in, women are so beaten down emotionally and mentally, because, of course, women are trying to, a lot of women in prison are mothers, right? So they're trying to see their children, they're trying to get home to their children, and those things are weaponized against them, and I'm sure there's some things you saw. So I definitely want to spend a few minutes talking about women's incarceration.
I went in at age 17, barely 55 days after my 17th birthday with a life without parole sentence. So as I was in prison, you definitely see, I was broken. I came from domestic violence. I was broken, and a lot of times officers use that against us. They also target us. They also use it to manipulate for sexual favors. It can come different forms in a women's prison, but often in a women's prison, mothers go to prison, right? And the officers will take your visits. You won't see your children. You will lose your children. That is definitely weaponized towards you, that everything you do will reflect on your children. They definitely utilize tearing you down even more than building you up. Thank God for mamas in prison that loved on me and made me become who I was, mentors in prison, because if it was left to the system, we'd all stay broken and destroyed, honestly.
Very much
That's
so.
the best way I can put that.
Yeah,
It's domestic violence in a different form. It's just those that leave after 8-hour shift. But they definitely utilize abuse, yelling at you, getting in your face, telling you you're no good, you'll never see your children, you'll always be a junkie. I was always told, I was just telling Clifton this last night, the only way you'll leave is in a pine box. That's what I was told all the time by a lieutenant all the time. They thought that was funny.
And what part of rehabilitation is that, right? And that would be my question in all of these, experiences. And of course, Mataka and Clifton experienced, horrible things in prison as well. What part of this violence and this abuse, emotional trauma is rehabilitative?
None of it is rehabilitative. I will tell you where rehabilitation comes from. It's us that did long sentences that create programs in the prison, and we teach each other. It's programs that we have found, like, this isn't working for me. I need a change. And so just like anything else, the juvenile law, I'm under the Miller versus Alabama. It's very true. As you mature, the brain matures, you change. That's when my change happened. As I got older, 10 years in my sentence, I started to see things in life a little bit different. So when you see rehabilitation, it is us who created the systems in there to rehabilitate one another. The state of Missouri and these other states have not created anything that rehabilitates us. Every program you see has probably been done by somebody formerly incarcerated.
That's very real. That's very real. So we're going to wrap up with the slides. That was actually the last one. But before we take a few questions, I wanted to go through one more time. In about 2 or 3 minutes, we talked about the issues and what is happening, right? But I want to get all of you all's opinion and viewpoint about why we need to care about these issues of incarceration in Missouri, and what does that look like if we are able to build that base and get support? What does it look like to actually change what's happening?
Thank you. There's 2 things I want to start with first as I listen to Sheena. And none of us sat here today, on our own accord. Something that she talked about the women that took her in there. When you go to prison as a juvenile, you go there like a blank canvas. So that environment is going to shape and mold you. And one of the perceptions that politicians specifically and the media wants to project to the society is that everybody in there is evil and wicked. But I went in prison, I was certified at 16 years old. I went to prison when I was 17 years old. If everybody in prison was even wicked, I wouldn't even be sitting here today. There was men in there that took me in and taught me how to be a man. There was men in there that I looked up to that had morals, principles, and values that I admire, and I began to incorporate and adopt the characteristics that I seen in some of the positive men in there that was creating programs like she talked about. So I don't sit here by myself. I sat here because there was individuals that saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And so I will always remember them, and that's why we say we're not free until they're all free. And then we look at the numbers and some of the statistics. When individuals that vote for building prisons and giving money to prison, giving money to the Missouri Department of Corrections, a few years ago when Eric Greitens was governor, they gave the Missouri Department of Corrections like $750 or $850 million. This surpassed, I believe, $1 billion now. But yet Missouri has one of the highest recidivism rates in the country. But they took money away from education. Just imagine giving an entity more money that's failing. You're giving a failing entity more money. And then you have individuals who vote for these laws to throw people in prison for the rest of their life, and they never once been inside of a prison. What are you basing your vote on? If you a politician and you ain't never walked inside of a prison, but you believe this person deserves life, we need 4 more prisons here. What are you basing that number on? What are you basing this decision on if you never walked inside of a prison? There's only a handful of politicians today that even go inside prison, and I give kudos and admiration to those that do, but those that will never walk inside there but will sit there and cast a vote about something that they really don't know nothing about. It's a mindset and mentality that, well, we're just going to continue on with the same practice regardless of whether it works or not. This system is like a spider's web, ladies and gentlemen. You know, in a spider's web, it catches lightweight creatures. But that spider moves fast in that web. And when it gets to the creature that's caught in that web, it takes everything out of it that gives it life and nothing left but a shell. So what was a fly, it still looked like a fly, but the life that was in the fly is gone. This is what they want men and women to come out of prison to be, a shell with no life. Something that used to look whole, something that used to look human. And so what we need, the reason why these things are important, why we need to advocate and spread this message, because when men and women come home healed, when they come home whole, they don't re-victimize society. That's what this is about, the victims, right? Well, if you're worried and you're concerned about the victims, as we all should be, then you should invest in those that you say victimize individuals. We spend billions and trillions of dollars to send things to other planets, but you won't invest in the potential of human beings? We spend all this money on technology and building buildings, but you ain't going to invest in human beings that eventually going to destroy all the technology and the buildings that we building. And I don't even have a master's degree. I don't have a BA or a BS. It's common sense. The recidivism rate is high in the state of Missouri because somebody cares about job security. The state is the #1 employer in the state of Missouri. So Dora Sherrow, and I'll quote her from the Native American Times newspaper in 1995, she told them at a prison convention when they were looking to buy some more handcuffs and mace, said, what about rehabilitation? She said, if I rehabilitate them, they get out and don't come back, I won't have a job.
No doubt.
95% of the men and women that are in prison have parolable sentences. If they don't die, they will get out one day. How do we want them to come home? How do we want them to re-enter society? This is just a fact. They're going to walk out of there one day and be in the neighborhood, be at the Walmart, be at the gas station with you. And when individuals come home and they try, but they don't have the skills and they don't have the support that they need to make it, they revert back to the only thing that they know.
And ain't nobody safe. No, you go ahead.
Thank you. That's all I had to say.
So, yeah, Cliff, that was good. So I just want to piggyback on something that Cliff said. We were talking about the incarceration rates of black men 4 to 5 times higher than that of white men. When you look at the population in Missouri, it's crazy because the white population, I think, is 4,800,000+, whereas black people make up totally like 681, 682,000. But on another, extending on what Cliff was talking about, right? How do we want people to come back to the communities? 80% of childhood delinquency is due to the lack of a male father figure. Cliff went through a transformative process. I went through a transformative process. But if people who are going through transformative processes because they're trying to become better men are killed and never get an opportunity to come out, then we wipe generations of leadership out of the community who could transform and reverse the course of the communities that we're talking about that are engulfed in crime right now. The people who can help the communities are at risk of not being able to be released into the communities, and they have parolable sentences. So when we talk about death through litigation, when we talk about it through prison violence, there's another form that people don't talk about: medical neglect. Medical neglect. You got a lot of companies that take these contracts, know you in stage 1, misdiagnose you, wait till you get to stage 4 and say it's too late because they got somebody waiting to take your spot that's healthier and we can get that profit off this death, right? But when you look at what's going on in our community and how men set the tone, Cliff is a community advocate. I'm a community advocate. Sheena's a community advocate. ML is a community advocate. We all are community advocates because we experienced something that allowed us to transform ourselves for the better. We saw the need for work and we came out and we engaged in it. We ain't the only ones. Cliff told you it was people in there who we adopted the models. They were models for us. And some of these men have an opportunity to come home again. Some of them will never get an opportunity to come home again. So we deprive our communities of the potential leadership that could reverse the course of what we're seeing. 80% of childhood delinquency is due to the lack of a male father figure. And that's important for us to get out, those of us who have undergone the rehabilitative process. So the need for advocacy and the need to support this is literally at its root core about making sure that human beings are protected and making sure that we have an opportunity to have people who have transformed themselves become models in our community so we can reverse the course.
I would like to add that, when I came home We have a picnic every year for juveniles that have came home in Missouri. And I took a picture, and it was just me, the little white indigenous girl, and over 40 black men behind me in this picture. So when you start looking at long-term and disparity in sentencing, Missouri is great at it. When a young man who's 16 got 246 years, or a young man who has 16 for robbery had 1,001 years. How many, if we looked at our statistics, are serving life without parole and told they'll never come home? But the same people they let out in these communities in Missouri and all over the United States due to Miller versus Alabama are in their communities and healing them. We are the ones out here starting community programs, asking people to put the guns down, asking people not to go to prison. Those are the people that they are keeping locked up in Missouri prisons. The ones who will come out here and heal their communities because they've been there, they've done that. They're the ones they're going to listen to. But see, the government, they don't want that because they don't want to heal our communities. They want to profit our communities.
That's very, very true, Sheena. Thank you. I'll end by saying why I believe that we need this work. We need prison organizing, prison advocacy. It's all about accountability. We all here have been held accountable for things we've done, and whether we actually did them or not, we have been held accountable for certain things. The system is never held accountable for what it does. And I'll look back even at childhood. There are kids who are, living in food deserts. There are children who have mental health issues. There are children who are unhoused. All of these things, children in foster care, all of these things add up to why a person later in their life is incarcerated, is criminalized, is arrested, and goes to prison. The system is never held accountable, all those steps leading up to. But when you're sitting in front of a judge and a jury, and it's like, oh, you did this, and we're holding you accountable today, and you're going to prison. When is the system going to be held accountable for its failures, right? And that never happens. And of course, like someone said earlier, it is all by design. But that is one reason why I think we need this space, we need this movement to push to hold our system accountable, Missouri Department of Corrections, but also our elected officials in this state. I work with and connect with a lot of other people in a lot of other states doing the same work, and a lot of them have been successful. Wasn't overnight, 10, 20 years of consistent work, but that is what I envision us in 5 or 10 years. And we are starting and holding our system accountable and trying to even have them step back and look at what is the problem has been challenging, right? Because they don't want to be held accountable. Prosecutors don't want to understand that they put innocent people in prison. They know it, but they don't want to accept it. Our elected officials, overall, when we're talking about these issues at our Capitol, are like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. Now you know, what are you going to do? So the main reason why I think we need this movement in this space is about accountability, is about putting these issues in front of those who can act on them, and getting our base built around this. I tell people often when family members call me and they're like, oh, this is happening to my loved one, incarcerated, and I need your help. I'm like, okay, I don't have a problem helping you. And these are the steps. And I have taken people to our Capitol to talk to their elected officials, because I told one lady one day, I'm a black woman from St. Louis. Your representative in Springfield, Missouri don't care about me. I'm not his constituent, right? I don't live there. I didn't vote for him, all those things. But let me take you to the Capitol and introduce you to this office, to this elected official, and you and your community need to hold them accountable, right? So that is the work that needs to be done. That is why we are the founder of the organization and trying to push and build, because there has to be accountability for the systems actors that have not been held accountable thus far. Of course, we are in St. Louis right now, so much work has gone into holding our own local elected officials accountable, and I support it, and I'm look at that as role model to what we can do over the entire state. So that is, like I said, the main reason I think we want to keep building and keep spreading the word about why prison advocacy and organizing is important. Definitely wanted to take some questions. So if any, and Sheena has been nice enough to come around, so if anybody has a question, maybe Sheena can bring the mic to you. And then also, this is the last slide. This is all of our contact information. Overall, MoJustice.org is the website. info@MoJustice.org is the email. And follow us on socials at MoJustice.org. Definitely would love to, keep in connection with you all, and also the people watching virtually as well. And, would love your support around these issues. So go ahead, Sheena. I think they had a question.
So I work in violence prevention down in Southwest Missouri. And what I know from that work is that all these forms of violence and harm are connected.
Yes.
And that slide that you showed with, the top 10 states incarcerating Black people, those are all the same states that have the highest rates of gun violence, health issues, low education rates, the highest rates of domestic violence, maternal mortality. Like, those are the states where so much harm is happening.
Yes.
I'm just curious if anyone on the panel, what's your take? How do we address all of those things? I feel like it needs collective action or collective solution. I don't know what that is, but I would just love to hear from any of you that have thoughts on that. How do we address all of those issues? Because all of that plays into the issue with incarceration that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I'll start real quick, and I'm sure Clifton or Mataka would have something to add, but I'll start and say the intersectionality of it all is there, right? That is definitely something that I talk about, how there is not a societal issue you can name me that I cannot connect to incarceration. There is not one, right? Not just locally, nationally, globally. We can look at what's going on in Palestine and Gaza, what's going on in the Sudan. All of these things are societal ills, right? There's a direct correlation to incarceration. So I'll say this. We need to work together, communities, right? And I have been a person who, if there is an issue happening some other place, or another issue, like for instance, work in St. Louis about the unhoused communities, right? Or the work about our St. Louis jail. I try to support those things because I know that those are connections. So I think the solution is going to be us, community, right? Getting together, working in collaboration with each other. I know a lot of people are siloed and I'm doing this over here and I ain't got time for that, but we have to understand those intersections. It's unavoidable because once a child is unhoused, a child is, hungry, et cetera, that child's going to grow up to be 16 or 17 and get the robbing stores or whatever, right, and trying to feed themselves and their families, which that happens, and are incarcerated. So all of these things are interconnected, so it is very important for us to lend our support to other things. And of course, one person, but community. So I think community is the key. And real quick, even in your question, I want to talk about abolition really fast. One of the things, the pushbacks I've gotten about abolition is, because I am an abolitionist, I believe in the total collapse of all systems that oppress Black and poor people. I do. But when people talking about, we can't just open up all the prison doors tomorrow. I get that, and that is not what abolition is. Abolition is replacing this with that, replacing incarceration, oppression, marginalization, all of the ills we have, replacing that with community, with housing, with healthcare, with food security, right? Replacing what is not working with something that does, and guess what? We won't need no prison, right? We won't be in them. Our people will have the support and the resources that they need, so there will not be, quote unquote, a crime problem. So I really think that understanding that intersectionality of everything that we're doing and making sure that we're all somehow coming together to do that work. It ain't easy. Egos are egos, right? But we all have to step back and understand that we have to work together to make sure that we tackle all of these things, because doing one thing and leaving everything else is going to spill over, of course, into incarceration. So thank you, but I definitely wanted to put it over to anybody else who wanted to comment.
For me, the connecting point is trauma and poverty. trauma and poverty. Poverty breeds frustration and despair, and that breeds criminality. Right? So you have people who are engulfed in trauma, people who have never had an opportunity to grow, constantly in survival mode. And so in this survival mode, it creates a competitive frustration out of that violence. And so when we understand how trauma impacts brain development, right, we have to delve off into this, because even though it's psychological, there are biological and neurological elements to this that hold this system in place too. Human beings' biology has transformed over time as a result of prolonged exposure to trauma and traumatic situations. So for me, the intersectionality, the commonality is the trauma that people suffer from. And so when you look at all of those groups of people that you name, trauma is heavily laden in all of those things that you name. So we need to understand about trauma, not just the basic trauma-informed care stuff that you get from SAMHSA or anybody else. We need to look at the specifics of the groups of people that you talk to and how racism and poverty mix into that and create that trauma. And we are the victims of injuries that have never been corrected. And so it's not going to ever get better. We had this idea that it's just going to get better with no work. But in actuality, it's continuing to get worse. And we're witnessing it. And now what Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It's like a malignant cancer that's growing and growing and growing, and everybody's watching, and then now it's getting too big and people are scared. And so we have to understand, in my opinion, right, the commonality is trauma and the conditions that produce that trauma. Racism, which gave birth to poverty.
Yeah, very true, very true. And you said, real quick, you said you're in Southwest Missouri, so you like around Springfield. Well, Sheena is in Springfield. We're all from different places. Actually, Clifton and Mataka live in Columbia. Sheena's in Springfield. I'm in St. Louis. I got some folks in Kansas City. So we're definitely across the state. So we definitely love that connection. And thank you so much for the question. Did anybody else have a question? Okay. Over there.
I just wanted to add to that how Glenn Martin says, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
Yes.
So we need to start using people who have lived the experience making decisions, not people who've never been in a situation of hunger or imprisoned or racism making those decisions.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. If I could, I have a question. I have a couple comments and an apology, actually. But so I came to the nonprofit sector like 8 years ago, and I came in kind of puppies and rainbows. And one of the first things I started asking was, you know, where's the funding for reentry? I'm now on the board of the Criminal Justice Ministries for that reason. I had a passion for it. But I say that to say the uphill battle isn't just with the prison system. So we have currently in St. Louis foundations and nonprofits that come into underserved communities and profess to be there to help uplift the community who will not touch reentry. Funders who still will not fund it, it's taboo, and organizations who won't. So I don't, you know, my question was always, how do you uplift a community if you're not going to address the very real thing of reentry? So that's up against you too. Once you get out of prison, it's not just the system, it's here, and you guys know this. The second point is, you know, I heard a police officer in a social setting make the statement, and he was bragging about it, that if we want you guilty, you'll be guilty. You know, it doesn't, and that made me sick. And then that brings me to the apology. So I went to jail the first time when I was 17 in St. Louis County, and I was the only white young man there. And I mean, I look young now for my age. There, I looked like a baby, right? And I had a white police officer who said to make sure I tell him if I have trouble making bail. When I was just a couple years older than Michael Brown, I hit a police officer. I struck a police officer physically, punched a police officer. I'm sitting here today. And that's my apology, because I'm sitting here because I don't look like these two gentlemen next to you. And it's embarrassing, but white privilege doesn't stop at not being pulled over. It extends to when we've gotten in trouble. I should have went to jail. I probably would have been in prison for hitting a police officer, but because of my privilege of not just what I looked like in that case, some connections that my family had, I didn't, and that rots in my stomach to this day. So I just, every chance I have, I want to apologize for that, because the white privilege is just not getting in trouble. When we get in trouble, there's privilege too, and it's disgusting.
Wow.
But.
Thank you for saying that. I wanted to talk about the reentry aspect of your comment. I think that funders, organizations, entities that have resources always look to someone else to solve certain issues, right? And funders saying, we don't do reentry work. Well, if you don't do reentry work, whatever issue that you do fund, you're going to have to fund that even more because the people who are affected by that are affected by incarceration. Even that person, their mother, father, et cetera, child, is going to definitely snowball the support or the help that whatever issue they are funding is going to snowball the need for that, right? Because they're not helping with this. I have, ran into those issues even when I myself came home from incarceration. I was homeless. I got home in July of 2015, and I believe in March of 2016, I finally found a place to live. But I was literally in an extended stay hotel for several months and having to pay it because I could not get, reentry resources, et cetera. I think I did get like a pack of bus tickets from one entity, but other than that, I didn't get help. And that is, you're right, so much of that happens still today, because that was 2015. Still today, so much of that is happening. And I just think that, again, the question earlier about the intersectionality, even the people with the resources have to understand that, okay, I may be funding this issue, but there are so many other issues that are interconnected with that, and I may not be able to give all of my resources to these other things, but definitely trying to funnel some funds to reentry and the other issues that affect incarceration or affect the work that I'm doing. Intersectionality is not just about us organizers and advocates, right? It is about the resources. It is about philanthropy. It is about the grants, right? And that does need to be addressed. I really appreciate you mentioning that, but that is something that needs to be addressed because we are not adequately even supporting people when they come home, and that honestly falls to people like us. I get so many requests for support from people coming home. People in prison call me like, hey, my friend just got out a couple days ago. He needs some help. Can you help him? And I do that all the time. I can run a reentry org if I, felt like that was my calling, right? So I know you two definitely do that as well. So it is very much something that there is such a gap in that, and we definitely do what we can. But I think that those people with the resources need to understand that even their funding issues, there are intersections involved in those too.
Thank you for your question. Real quick, I learned something one day. I always worked in the law library in prison. When I got to prison, I dropped out in the 10th grade, 0 credits. I made it to the 10th grade because they said no teacher wanted me in their classroom 2 years in a row. And when I got there, I could barely read. And a brother named K. Bell Leo offered me to read a book called The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And I said, I would love to read it, brother, but I got a learning disability. And he's like, brother, you ain't got no learning disability. And I said, yes, sir. Every school I've been to, I was in special ed. He said, brother, you ain't got no learning disability. When it comes to teaching black kids, the public school system has a teaching disability. And once I learned how to read and write, I took to it like a fish took to water, and I love etymology, I love words, I love languages, and I love to read. And I was reading something about the Vietnam War. And I learned that in Vietnam, it's not called the Vietnam War, it's called the American War. And so something that we need to talk about, because we talk about slavery as if it's a black history. No, slavery is white history. Black history predates slavery. It's just about, we talk about white privilege and we talk about progress. If you had a vehicle that was in a car accident and the insurance adjuster come and he give you an estimate, you want the value of the car before or after the accident? So when we talk about progress, don't start at slavery, start at the condition you found us before we was enslaved. That's how you measure progress. And that's why we have to look at this in a full scope, because you make it a straw man argument when you say, oh, you're better off today than you were in slavery. Actually, we're not. We're mentally worse off today than we were in slavery, because during slavery, black men weren't allowed to have guns. Now today, black men have guns, and who do they kill? Would black men be killing each other at this rate 200 years ago? There was a shift that done took place. Malcolm said it best. He said that mental slavery is 10 times worse than physical slavery. And he said, a man that don't treat you right will not teach you right. We have to understand that the slave master is never going to teach the slave what he knows. And what we don't understand, though we may have been to school, we may be educated, we may be this, but the education system was created by rich, wealthy white men, not to free anyone to make you their equal, because a slave master is not going to teach you to be his equal. He's going to teach you how to be a better slave, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is. Thank you.
A couple more questions if anybody else had a comment or question.
I have I guess I was going to say quick question, but it's not a quick question. I'm also an abolitionist, and I was wondering how you all balance the struggle of this whole thing needs to be destroyed, and we have to make the conditions better for the people who are currently in the system, and how, I guess, MoJustice does that, and how you would personally do that, and make that balance.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I know we ain't got a lot of time, but this is one of those issues like I can literally talk for an hour. I have ran into the situation where I am trying to improve a person's living conditions and what they are dealing with, and I've had other comrades come to me like, we just need to, abolish the prison. Yeah, we do, but guess what? I'm in reality today, and today my people is in the cage. Right? I would love to get them out the cage, but if I do that, then I'm in the cage too, so probably don't want to do that. But we have something like, we didn't get here overnight, is my point. You know what I'm saying? We got here the hundreds of years, so we're not going to get out of this overnight. And so being an abolitionist and being someone who definitely wants to see all of these systems collapse, right? I understand that in order to get to that place, I have to make sure my people are whole, they are returned to their communities, actually rehabilitated, so they don't actually go back to incarceration. So it is a fine line. Even myself, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to advocate for someone to get better, like healthcare incarcerated. I want that person to be at home in their communities with their families, yes. But right now in this moment, this is not utopia. I can't be like, these are my utopian dreams. Yeah, but I am still in reality, and today this person is incarcerated. Today they're in pain, they're suffering, they're not getting the treatment they need. So I need to try to help them in that today so they can live later while once we get free, or once we abolish the systems and those sort of things. So it is definitely something that even weighs on me, every single day. And if it didn't, I think that would be problematic. But I do look at my work and what I'm doing and trying to, quote unquote, the reform movement, right? Trying to reform and rehabilitate how our system traumatizes my people, but also wanting to abolish those systems. But that's how we're going to do it, because of people coming out healthier and whole, like Mataka said earlier, they're not going to be recidivating, right? They're not going to going back to prison. They're going to be in their communities healing and helping other people. So I look at that as a part of abolition, because we're eventually going to get to that place where I don't care if a prison building is standing, I just don't want my people inside of it. And that's my main goal. But thank you for that. That is definitely a challenge that we do face, and it's an internal battle all the time. But I will say this: I have certain integrity points where I don't cross certain lines. Like earlier this year or late last year, I was invited to a gala with the DOC administrators. I'm not galaing with DOC. Right? I'm not sitting at an 8 table with all the silverwares and talking. Now, I would meet with you and try to figure out, how we can work together about accountability and about getting people the help and support and treatment they need while they're safe. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not coming in some social setting and hee-hee and ha-ha with the DOC director. That's just not, my level of integrity ain't going to allow me to do that. Some people do, that's them, but I just want to keep it professional and make sure that I am approaching these people with the thoughts in mind about rehabilitation, accountability, and not necessarily, being so enmeshed in societal events with them, right? That's just something that I personally don't do. So I do keep certain boundaries, right? But that is a constant, struggle mentally. So thank you for that question. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to tackle it as well.
Real quick, I wanted to just add in there, when y'all came in the room, there was a voice speaking. And that voice speaking was Fred Hampton, chairman of the Black Panther Party, who was murdered by the Chicago Police Department. How old was Fred Hampton when he was murdered?
He was, the other person was 27, chairman was 21.
21 years old. He was murdered by his government at 21 because he was able to unify people of all races, ethnicity, and create a program through the Black Panther Party where they fed children breakfast and lunch for free, over 10,000 children in Chicago. He showed that in that capacity that the government was obsolete. He wasn't taking in government funds or getting donated. They did this just strictly through the community. And something I just want to add before we get up out of here is that something I learned from being a part of different organizations, and when I was in prison, I was part of the prison chapter of NAACP. I was part of the chapter of this. I was part of this. I mean, I'm trying to find myself. And what I learned from being in all these different organizations, especially when they're real big, only 20% of the people do 100% of the work. And so when we talk about coming together, when we talk about unity, we try to get all these numbers to make it look like that's progress or we're really doing something big. But I know from being on the inside that only 20% of you actually doing any real work. Everyone else just showing up, and that's fine. But when are we going to get that 20% that's actually going to do the work to set in the room together?
Okay, one more question, then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, well, first of all, just thank you guys so much for your time. Like, I think I can speak for myself, but I'm sure everyone else would agree. Like, it's just such a blessing and a gift to just hear you all speak and share stories and perspective. I personally benefited so much from folks just pouring into me in that way. So I do have a question in terms of, I work on a reentry organization here in St. Louis. And I was just curious what, for those of us who are wanting to get further involved, further engaged, what would your recommendations be for continued engagement and to be a part of that 20%?
Thank you very much. First, I want to say, to answer that question as well, because I know everybody is not necessarily from St. Louis, so I definitely want to say that the prisons, we have 19 prisons in Missouri all over the state. Ain't one in Kansas City or St. Louis, right? There's not a prison in our city on purpose, but we have 19 prisons across the state. We are trying to organize the entire state of Missouri. So if you are in other places, Columbia, Springfield, Kansas City, even the Boot Hill area, we definitely are, wanting to get together. So I will say, as far as how to support, definitely connect with us, go to the website, look around. I have a lot of resources on the website. One of them is a map where you can click on a prison and see who the state rep and state senator is that's over that prison. That is very important because these prisons are in their districts, so they need to be paying attention to what's happening. So check out the site. Also, we do different events. Coming up in October, there will be an event around on October the 10th. There is a day called the World Day Against the Death Penalty. So there will be an event that day. We have an annual advocacy day at the Capitol, which will be March 4th of 2026. And we normally get about 50, 60 people, but we definitely want more people to attend. And not just formerly incarcerated people or family members, which we need those, but we need other people. The SLU sent a group of students last year, like from, I think the criminal justice program came to our lobby day. So any group can come. Churches can come. So we are asking people to come to our state capitol to connect with our elected officials and talk to them about why these issues are important. There are hearings that are held all during the legislative session because we are pushing to get like bills about oversight or good time credit filed, and they have been filed the last several years, not passed, which of course we know Missouri, how hard it is to pass a bill that's going to help somebody. So we need people to come to those events, right? So there is definitely ways to get involved. A couple years ago, I did something called a town hall tour, which I went to 6 places across the state and connected with people, mostly people who are formerly incarcerated or family members, just to talk to them about these issues. So we have to be a statewide movement that's willing to go across the state. So again, like I said, Sheena's in the Springfield area, and she organizes that area. And so we're trying to connect with impacted people formerly incarcerated, but also other people. Again, going back to intersectionality, people that are in drug addiction treatment, supporting and advocating and connecting with them. People that do all types of work we're looking to, partner with. So as far as supporting, follow us on socials, follow the website, get on the mailing list. If you go to the website, you can get on the mailing list. And also the QR code, I believe it goes to the mailing list. You can put your name and email address in there and get our updates. And support us. So reach out. That's the email address. Reach out. There's everyone else's email is on there as well. So Clifton, Mataka, and Sheena. So I think those connections. So this is a day to create a connection and to keep going with it and showing up for each other. Like you say, you do reentry work. I would love to connect with you, and I'm sure everyone else here will too. So we have to work with each other and support each other. So and like I said, show up. Like next March the 4th, I told someone if I can get 1,000 people in Missouri State Capitol in one day, they ain't got no choice but to listen to me, right? So that's something that we're trying to work towards, to get our people to the state capitol to really have those conversations with our elected officials. So. Yeah, we're definitely going to get more folks to join us. So yes, MoJustice.org is the website. Thank you all again so much for joining us today and for understanding that Missouri is the most northern state of the South, but also building this prison advocacy movement is vital to our safety, our security, and our rehabilitation and our healing. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pig. The people are going to have to stand up against the pig. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
We have brought to trial here Fred Hampton. You are here to judge between 2 conflicting testimonies. Somebody is lying. Now, reason stands. Reason is very clear here. That Private Jones, who had come from Sanford, North Carolina, would have no great desire to see Fred Hampton up in this trial. But Fred Hampton, a key figure in this community, has great reason for not wanting to be put in jail.
But the state's attorney and the state's attorney's office has reason to see Fred Hampton in jail. We've got a new state's attorney. And he said already what he thought about people that had different political beliefs than he had. His speeches sound somewhat like those of Hitler. And we know why he wants to see Fred Hampton put in jail. Why do I have a lot of arrests? Because of harassment. Why is there harassment? Because the people that harass me have set up a problem that made me disagree with them violently. And they set up this problem in order to exploit me and other people like me. And why they want to get rid of me? Because I'm saying something that might wake up some other exploited people and some other oppressed people. And if all these people ever get together, then these pigs that are exploiting us, we'll be able to run them into the lake. That's why they want to get rid of us. And it's just, it's sort of like a primary thing with me. I'm the first move that they'll make. I'm a part of an organization who will be the first organization they'll move on, because I happen to be a part of an organization, the Black Panther Party, that is the only organization, in fact, that has came out and stood up loud and clear saying that we don't care what anybody says, whether they have guns or not, and badges or 18 uniforms. If whenever they step outside the bounds of legality into the bounds of illegality, then we'll blow their brains out if they bother the people. And what makes them mad about that? They're constantly bothering the people. Anybody that's out there for the protection of the people happens to be in direct conflict with them. What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they had black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American poor people of people of all descent. They had a problem with their group based on racism and the black satisfied to them. You don't deal with that thing. You don't think the black 5 for 5 minutes, you think black 5 to 1 minutes. We're going to fight racism, not racism. We're going to fight the top list. We're not going to fight capitalism, black capitalism, but we're going to fight the push. We're not going to fight reactionary things and reactionary things like this and reactionary things like Henry and many other reactions on alcohol. We're going to fight their reactions to all those people get together and have an impact on their revolution. That's it on our people. That's saying no matter what color you are, you're going to your class. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never hit anything to get this class off its back because this is the oppressed, this is the oppressed, this is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have decided themselves and say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbilly. I'm hillbilly and I hate hillbilly. So we fight amongst each other. And you heard the testimony of pigs here, you got pigs all over. You got pigs in white, you got pigs in black, you got pigs in black and white. Propagating the same type of madness that this buffoon Henry would be propagating if he were here himself. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would disregard him and overlook him just for a minute and throw away that question of racism and start into dealing with a little logic, then there would be no one else you could attack other than Hanrahan, other than Daley, and other than Tricky Dicky Nixon. If you make the right decision, then the oppressed people of the world get complete satisfaction. I know you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
My name is Joe Amrine. 67 years old. I stay here in Kansas City, Missouri. I spent 27 years in Missouri State Prison. I spent 17 years on Missouri's death row. I was exonerated in 2003, so I've been out 20 years. Next month will be 20 years, my anniversary. I had a struggle trying to get my freedom, even though I was actually innocent. I was convicted of committing a murder in prison at Missouri State Penitentiary of another inmate. There was no evidence against me, but they had inmates who testified against me for the state, which is one of the issues which we hear today about. Inmates being allowed to testify against other inmates without having no physical evidence to corroborate their testimonies.